In order to understand the whole picture, we look into China's history. Throughout the majority of recorded history, China was once a supreme power in science and technology, including gunpowder, paper, the compass, and movable type printing are four of China's most famous inventions, but in fact ancient China's achievements went far beyond these big four. The big four were responsible for several inventions, including wheel and axle technologies, iron production, and imperial horsemanship. Like modern China, China was known for its great degree of innovation in the years preceding the 6th century. China was far ahead of the rest of the world in terms of technology. China boasted well-developed industry for salt and textiles. China's use of water power for twine spinning in the 13th century was already on par with that of its European counterparts in the 18th. Some have even gone so far as to say that these four major Chinese technologies are responsible for the birth of contemporary Europe. China was incredibly creative in many areas, including farming, crafts, astronomy, mathematics, and technology, and it both outpaced and influenced European technological advancements. In several areas, including metallurgy, shipbuilding, navigational methods, and many others, China regularly outperformed Europe by several centuries. Between the 6th century and the 13th century, China's technological development stalled, stagnated, and eventually collapsed, and its early technological leadership did not set the country on a modernization path. Innovation was in their bloodlines, they just need moment, when to waken the dragon in themselves and become again true leaders in science and technology, and Deng Xiaoping was the leader, who put them on that track of prosperity and innovation. We will look into what national and business strategies were adopted by Chinese leaders and to make these strategies effective, how concept of world-class HR was started in limited time of last 40 years. Beginning in 1979, China launched several managerial reforms. The central government initiated price and ownership incentives for farmers, which enabled them to sell a portion of their crops on the free market. In addition, the government established 4 special economic zones along the coast for the purpose of attracting foreign investment, boosting exports, and importing high-technology products into China. Economic control of various enterprises was given to provincial and local governments, which were generally allowed to operate and compete on free market principles, rather than under the direction and guidance of state planning. In addition, citizens were encouraged to start their own businesses. In the field of VET, China has conducted international benchmarking reviews and created partnerships with a number of countries, in particular Germany, Japan, Singapore, UK, and Australia, but also Sweden and, more recently, with US community colleges. If China need to develop world-class HR, who can work for world-class organizations, there was epic need that someone train them. It was not possible to send so many people for foreign training, but it was possible to train them in-house by renowned world-class organizations and their expert. This journey started with Deng Xiaoping's famous talk on the introduction of talents on July 8, 1983, an increasing number of foreign talents and professionals have come to work in China. Their work has contributed to the country's development. Since the first group of foreigners settled in China, the government has formulated and adopted many policies for managing and serving foreign talents. State Education Commission, together with the China Education Association for International Exchange, connected and cooperated with the English Language Institute, Educational Services Exchange with China, American Retired Teachers Organization, British Overseas Service Agency, etc., to bring more foreign language teachers into China. By the end of 1983, there were 3,921 long-stay foreigners in Beijing. This figure tripled to 12,076 at the end of 1987. The number of foreign talents, including foreign experts, technicians, and students, also increased correspondingly. China's HR development model was very effective at that time. As an example, the Shanghai Construction Group, a state-owned enterprise that was founded in 1953 as the Construction Bureau of the Shanghai government. The company recruits 1,500 people per year, 60% from universities and 40% from the vocational track. The school has the most up-to-date equipment for tunnel construction and construction simulations. Construction managers from the company teach in the school as well as teachers with more academic engineering backgrounds, who are also sent to work in the construction company in the summer. The curriculum is constantly adjusted to follow new developments in construction, and the company houses a research center on innovation in construction. In order to develop talented workforce, each province has developing its own strategies and policies. For example, after the launch of the Reform and Opening Up policy in 1978, Guangzhou has transformed from a planned economy to a market economy, becoming deeply involved in the global economy and in international competition. In the process, the city has encouraged and facilitated the free inflow of talent, investing tremendous financial resources in attracting overseas talents in order to catch up with Western developed countries. As one of the earliest cities to undergo opening up, it has aimed to attract talent from both home and abroad. In 1999, Guangzhou's municipal government issued the first talent recruitment policy, entitled Guangzhou Municipality Regulations on Encouraging Overseas Returnees to Work in Guangzhou. Since then, the city has issued new policies almost every year in a bid to attract high-level talent from overseas. China is evolving its HR and talent policies to compete the world in terms of quality, productivity, and innovation. At the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949, more than 80% of the population was illiterate. But from the start of Deng Xiaoping's opening up and reform or open door policies, education has been a major focus. As late as the mid-1970s, only 1 in 4 students actually graduated from primary school. The most rapid development has come in the decades of the 1980s, 1990s, and since 2000. This has been, in fact, the most rapid period of educational development in Chinese history. In the 1980s, schools reopened, and both primary and junior secondary enrollments rose gradually. In 1986, a new law guaranteed children 9 years of compulsory education as a right, 6 years of primary and 3 years of junior secondary, with the target of achieving this by the year 2000. During the 1980s, the emphasis on vocational education was renewed, and since the 1980s, VET has expanded substantially. In the 1980s and 1990s, VET schools and colleges expanded enormously in scale but had major problems of quality. Tianjin Sino-German Vocational and Technical College was founded as a training center in the mid-1980s, shortly after the opening up of China. It was a joint venture between the German and Chinese governments in which Germany provided funds and technical assistance to help to develop German-style dual-system VET in several cities in China. This is the biggest cooperative project in education between Germany and China. The college was linked to a Chinese state-owned enterprise in steel production, which also had German experts. In the early days of developing the special economic zone in Shenzhen of Guangdong province, with 100 million people. At that time, the only people with the skills for infrastructure development came from the army. The joint ventures with foreign companies were in basic manufacturing, most workers had very low educational and skill levels, and companies had to invest internally in whatever training was needed to run their businesses. Foreign invested firms brought managers from their home countries and also invested significantly in training for their Chinese workers. China's limited pool of university graduates was also concentrated in the newly developing enterprises, especially in the coastal cities. Collaboration between Shenzhen Polytechnic and local industries began right from the start, especially in the design of curriculum. In the first 10 years, as the college was growing very fast, the curriculum was very focused on skills for immediate application on the front line. Shanghai Dianji University sits on a gigantic new campus that is being built in what will be the new Shanghai Free Trade Zone. Begun in 1953 as the Shanghai Electrical Machinery Manufacturing School. The university has pioneered relationships with state-owned and Chinese private enterprises in the Shanghai area. Each major has a board of 10 people drawn from industry and other vocational schools to advise on the curriculum. Graduates have a 100% employment rate. Since 1978, China has used internationalization as a way of driving internal reform. In the field of VET, China has conducted international benchmarking reviews and created partnerships with a number of countries, in particular Germany, Japan, Singapore, UK, and Australia, but also Sweden and, more recently, with US community colleges. China started to systematically revamping its scientific and education systems. When Deng Xiaoping met Tanzanian Vice President Mwinyi in 1985, he said it is impossible for any country to develop and isolate itself without strengthening international exchanges and introducing advanced experience, science, and technology and capital from developed countries. It is impossible. Recognition of the importance of international exchange demonstrated the willingness of the Communist Party of China, CPC, and the Chinese government to integrate into the international market. In 1981, the National Science and Technology Commission had reported initial guidelines for the development of China's science and technology. 4 years later, in March and May of 1985, the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, CCCPC, released formal decisions to reform China's science and technology system as well as its educational system. Decision to reform China's science and technology system directly pointed out, at the same time of carrying out planning management for key national projects, we should use economic leverage and market regulation to make scientific and technological institutions have the ability of self-development and the vitality to automatically serve economic construction. University, industry cooperation was then adopted in the reform. Besides state-owned companies, private science and technology enterprises were also encouraged in improving the combination of scientific research and production. In addition, the industrial development sphere was supported by the Chinese government with special promotional policies in several intellectual resource-intensive areas. Such reforms helped to bring about the establishment of the new technology industry development zone in Zhongguancun in 1988. By creating a good environment for talents to emerge and people to do their best, individuals were allowed to establish scientific or technological service institutions and could get support and help from central or local governments. Improvement in science and technology could not take place without personnel exchange. As reflections of the two decisions, not only were Chinese scholars and scientists able to conduct international activities abroad, but in addition foreign researchers were welcome to do research in China. China adopted three-pronged strategy, for educational reforms, b. enhancing local education infrastructures and quality of education and training, secondly by collaborating with foreign universities and training institutes, and thirdly b. starting exchange programs. This strategy proven so effective, that we can observe that China's workforce is far ahead in many areas of science and technology, manufacturing, innovation, quality, and productivity. To support rapid industrialization, the central government undertook large-scale investments in physical and human capital during the 1960s and 1970s. As a result, by 1978 nearly three-fourths of industrial production was produced by centrally controlled, state-owned enterprises, SOEs, according to centrally planned output targets. Private enterprises and foreign invested firms were generally barred. A central goal of the Chinese government was to make China's economy relatively self-sufficient. Foreign trade was generally limited to obtaining those goods that could not be made or obtained in China. According to Chinese government statistics, China's real GDP grew at an average annual rate of 6.7% from 1953 to 1978. In 1978, the Chinese government decided to break with its Soviet-style economic policies by gradually reforming the economy according to free market principles and opening up trade and investment with the West, in the hope that this would significantly increase economic growth and raise living standards. As Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping, the architect of China's economic reforms, put it, "Black cat, white cat, what does it matter what color the cat is as long as it catches mice?" In the beginning of 1979, China launched several economic reforms. The central government initiated price and ownership incentives for farmers, which enabled them to sell a portion of their crops on the free market. In addition, the government established 4 special economic zones along the coast for the purpose of attracting foreign investment, boosting exports, and importing high-technology products into China. Economic control of various enterprises was given to provincial and local governments, which were generally allowed to operate and compete on free market principles, rather than under the direction and guidance of state planning. In addition, citizens were encouraged to start their own businesses. Trade liberalization was also a major key to China's economic success. Removing trade barriers encouraged greater competition and attracted foreign direct investment, FDI, inflows. China's gradual implementation of economic reforms sought to identify which policies produced favorable economic outcomes, and which did not, so that they could be implemented in other parts of the country, a process Deng reportedly referred to as crossing the river by touching the stones. This trial-by-error evolution allowed workable and localized transitions from one stage of economic development to the next. In the early 1980s, special economic zones were piloted in Shenzhen, near Hong Kong, Zhuhai, Shantou, and Xiamen, and 14 major coastal cities were opened up to foreign investment. These opened up China to foreign direct investment through the vehicle of joint enterprises. Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, and Japan were particularly important investors and managerial partners in the early zones. Joint enterprises benefited from special legal regulations and tax incentives. As an example, to encourage processing of goods for export, joint enterprises were allowed to import raw materials duty-free. These initial zones were so successful that the concept was expanded. In 1984, 14 cities had special economic zones. By 1993, there were 2,000 of them. Not only did the CEZs require labor for production, but more importantly, the new target cities needed construction and services. It was also because of the CEZs that residency rules affecting rural-urban migration began to be relaxed in China. Chinese government opened the economy to external investment and manufacturing and finally embarked upon domestic industrial restructuring. This process required a complex and calibrated process of guided institutional change involving decentralization and fundamental changes in the enterprise culture. Several economists have concluded much of China's rapid economic growth to 2 main factors: large-scale capital investment that productivity gains, i.e., increases in efficiency, have been another major factor in China's rapid economic growth. The improvements to productivity were caused largely by a reallocation of resources to more productive uses, especially in sectors that were formerly heavily controlled by the central government, such as agriculture, trade, and services. These 2 factors appear to have gone together hand in hand. His reforms show that in the face of globalization, especially the globalization of science and technology, China has started to reform its fundamental scientific and educational systems so as to be more competitive and ultimately develop world-class human resource to support national and business strategies. Flexible industrial policies and deregulation of research institutions and researchers played vital role in awakening of China. According to human capital theory, knowledge and skills have become the most important force driving modern economies. Therefore, countries are investing increasing amounts of their GDP in education. The bottom line is that virtually everything that China wants to accomplish depends on a dramatic improvement in the productivity of the Chinese worker, which, in turn, depends on a dramatic improvement in their education, skills, flexibility, and ingenuity. Chinese leaders waken the dragon, and nation is on the verge of becoming leading country of the world by setting marvelous examples for developing countries, who can learn how to become a world-class nation in few decades, but first countries need to identify their own strength and align them with lessons learned from China. I would like to say the Chinese leadership has proved nothing is impossible.